Hey guys, in this video series we're going to be covering the world of Swedish Mauser accessories. In this video we're going to be covering the Swedish bayonet. So you probably know the first Mauser adopted by the Swedes was in fact the M94 carbine. This is a proper M94 carbine made in 1895 by Mauser Oberndorf. And you see there is no attachment for a bayonet because these guns were originally meant for cavalry use, and the cavalry, they didn't need bayonets because they had a sword. So therefore the first Swedish Mauser rifle did not actually need a bayonet. So fast forward a couple years to the adoption of the M96 long rifle here. Now the Swedish infantry, of course, they want a bayonet to go with their rifle. So the Swedes kind of had a trials. There's a bunch of different types of experimental bayonets. And the Swedes ended up settling on a rather unusual design. This bayonet design is a full steel construction. Unlike typical traditional bayonets, there's no wooden grips, wooden inlays, anything like that. In fact, the handle is just sort of a steel tube, really. Now, even though this is called the M96 bayonet, it's not actually adopted in 1896. The order where this was officially adopted was written in October 15th, 1897. So it's just one of those things where the nomenclature doesn't exactly meet up with the actual date of adoption. Now, fast forward a few years to the adoption of the M94-14 carbine. This is just a standard M94 carbine with this bayonet adapter added to it. This was retroactively done to older carbines as well as added to all the new production carbines. And they kind of had to do this because these carbines ended up being issued to guys that actually kind of needed a bayonet. So, guys like artillerymen and, people that didn't need to be carrying around the big M96 rifle were issued these guns. So they needed a bayonet. And the way the M96 bayonet was designed to be attached to the M96 rifle, it's really not compatible with the M94 carbine, so they had to come up with a new method. This actually borrows pretty heavily from the SMLE bayonet nose cap design, and this is what the Swedes end up adopting for the carbine. So this is the M14 bayonet. You can tell it is a good bit longer than the M96 bayonet. It has a couple features that differ from the M96 bayonet. Of course, the way it locks up and everything is different. Overall, it's a much nicer looking blade with the wooden grip. It's a much more handsome of a knife, I would say, overall. Now, interestingly enough, even though the Swedish cavalry didn't want a bayonet to go with their carbine, they eventually stopped carrying swords and started carrying the bayonet. This is a frog that was specifically meant for Swedish cavalry. You can tell as it hangs on your belt, it kind of holds it down at an angle. And this is just to be more comfortable, sort of, when it's on the body, so that this doesn't go straight down. So this is much more better design if you're actually riding on a horse. Now let's do some close-ups so I can show you some more detail on these bayonets. So this will just kind of give you an idea of some of the variations that you'll find out there on these Swedish Mauser bayonets. Whenever you find these on the used market, they'll look anywhere from just completely worn, kind of silvery in color, if most of the bluing's worn off, all the way to looking really dark blued finish and nice. I don't really have one that's like super nice. But you can kind of tell just the overall finish differences on the bayonets. You probably noticed these frogs here. There is a pretty wide range of frogs issued with these bayonets depending on your role in the Swedish military. This is the earlier style Swedish frog. It uses two flaps that sort of go across diagonally. This first one goes in and holds the scabbard into the frog, and then the second one goes down and holds the actual bayonet blade into the scabbard. This was later replaced by the B design. This is just one single piece that goes straight up, holds the scabbard into the handle, and then it has this cross piece that goes over and holds the handle into the scabbard and everything. You can tell these are a B design because some of them actually have a B stamped into the leather. And again, you'll find these just all different shades and variations. There didn't seem to be any sort of standard, type of leather or color of leather used in making these, so you find all types of variations. Now, the way that you can tell if a frog is meant for an M14 bayonet or an M96 bayonet is by this cut here in the leather. So on the M96 bayonets, it's a much shallower of a cut, where on the M14 bayonets, it's a nice long deep cut. Overall, the frogs are, the sort of same overall pattern and layout. You could very easily mistake, an M14 bayonet for an M96 and vice versa. You just have to pay attention to this cut here. So there's three main producers for the M96 bayonet, and I have one from each laid out here. So this one here is the most common one you'll find. If you look up close, there's just a C with a crown on it. This is actually just a standard Carl Gustaf manufactured bayonet. Now you do have to kind of look down here in the handle because because the handle is a separate piece. You can find a different made blade on a different manufacturer's handle. So you just kind of look down here. You can see that it has the C crown. So this is a standard sort of Carl Gustaf manufactured bayonet. This one's probably the most understood bayonet. This one also has a crown but no C. And here on this side we can see the maker's mark. So we have a EJAB with an anchor in the middle. So a lot of people actually mistake this for a naval bayonet because of this anchor, but that was just a standard, manufacturer's marking. A lot of times these bayonets would be marked with whoever this was issued to. There's a wide array of markings. I don't know what all of them mean, but it's fairly common to find bayonets with these markings on it. And here we have one of the more rare makers of the bayonets. So this is just EAB. And we can see down here in the handle that this is EJAB handle. So this is an example of a bayonet that has, a piece from two different manufacturers put together. The manufacturer was also stamped on the scabbard here. Here we have EJAB, and here we have the crown C. You can also find EJAB and Carl Gustaf manufactured M14 bayonets. And the marking on the M14 bayonet is pretty much identical to that on the standard M96. So there's no locking method for the M96 bayonet. You just simply pull the scabbard off. For training purposes, the Swedes like to keep the scabbards on their bayonet, obviously for safety. So they fashioned these little clips. So what you do is you clip this onto the scabbard stud. This just snaps on like that. And then this goes around and snaps onto the handle, so that locks the two together so that the scabbard can't accidentally be removed from the bayonet. So that this makes training a lot safer with the M96 bayonet. And with the M14 bayonet, they just incorporated a lock into the bayonet design, so you can't take the scabbard off of the bayonet unless you actually press this button, which will then release it. And you can see how that works right there, just whenever you press this button. So here on top we have just a standard SMLE, and on the bottom the 9414. You can see this 9414 bayonet attachment borrows very heavily from the SMLE design, where typically on one of these bayonets, the muzzle ring hole here would obviously go over the muzzle. Originally, there was no barrel extension here on the 94s, the same way the muzzle doesn't protrude here from the front on the SMLE. So the muzzle ring has to go over some other sort of attachment or extension. So we have these extensions here, which obviously the muzzle ring just kind of goes over. This does have the added benefit of not interfering with the barrel harmonic, so this is kind of a neat overall design that you don't find on too many guns. Now the M96 bayonet attachment method is pretty unique as far as most military bayonets go. Instead of having a sort of push button release like on most traditional bayonets, you have this really weird spring powered detent. So the way this works, obviously the handle here is hollow, which serves to just kind of hold the cleaning rod. Ring goes over the muzzle, and then you can kind of see the way this works, where the bayonet just kind of clicks in there. The Swedes weren't very happy with this bayonet attachment method. It's not really the strongest method of attaching a bayonet, but obviously it was good enough if it stayed in service for so long. And then just to take it off, you just have to pull this, kind of pull it off. And in case you're curious, the M96 bayonet obviously works with the Swedish Jungmann or the AG42 here. And here's just another shot of all the different types of frogs that you'll run into out there. Kind of forgot to show you this one. This is what's called the NCO Frog, and this is pretty distinctive from the standard ones. These kind of typically go for a little bit more money than the standard ones, but I found that the bayonets that come with these NCO Frogs tend to be in a little bit better shape than most bayonets. Now this is sort of just a basic overview of some of the more common Swedish Mauser bayonets that you'll find out there on the market. Didn't get into a lot of the rare bayonets, like the Norwegian bayonet made by the Swedes, and the M15 bayonet, which is a little bit longer than the M14 bayonet. There's a lot of variation out there with Swedish Mauser bayonets, and it's just a really neat part of Swedish collecting, I think, is these bayonets. A lot of variations, different makers. It's just a really neat part of military collecting, I think. So if you have a Swedish Mauser, I'd highly recommend checking out some bayonets online. I think every rifle kind of needs the corresponding bayonet to go with it. Looks pretty good, like on display and stuff, and it's also just neat to have in a collection. Stay tuned for the next part of this video series, and I'll see you next time.